question, I'm just really curious for each of you, real quick, briefly. What's your top takeaway from the documentary and why? I mean, this could be your favorite moment, favorite character, favorite quote, something that encouraged you, discouraged you, excited you, surprised you. Pick one. I'll start with Jemimah.
I think my most exciting is to see that all three scientists actually went back. They went back. And I keep saying there's no joy in being the first and the only one. We've got to go back. And we've got to open those doors for all the girls and the young women that come after us.
What about you, Evelyn?
I think for me, what caught my thinking is, despite of everything, when Francine said she went back and started this foundation, leaving a job, I always remember coming back and you think, how can I come back? So it's more the being bold enough to start something and believing that when you start that something, it will feed into what your vision, and not waiting and not expecting that someone else will build that platform for you. I think all three of them, that's basically what they're saying is, I'm the one who's going to actually start this and get it going. So I
building that foundation, building that legacy, as Francine said, despite yourself.
Well, for me, I think it's the last lady and the three kids from Madagascar who were sleeping on the thing, and as they looked into her and as she explains and the way they lead with questions and everything, and then I just remembered how much African children and the future and everything, and how much we need to invest in it. I think it just sank on me like, wow, all those are the people that we need to reach out to.
Really good. So, so far, a lot of inspiration, no discouragement, no negative takeaways. So, something that I've, wondered to myself and aloud, and sometimes even with some of you here is, it seems that promoting women in science is the fashionable thing to do. Every politician is like, yes, yes, women, we love them, yes, support them all the time. Or, we've declared global days commemorating women in science. We have initiatives dedicated to supporting them, Mawazo included, L'Oreal Foundation included. There are very many of us. Governments and institutions have developed policies, regulations, strategies on the topic, and we're now even making documentaries about women in science, apparently. And so, why the big fuss about this? Why are we expending all this energy? And actually, this is a multi-part question, so I'm gonna say it all now, and I'll let you guys tackle it each from your own perspective. Keep it brief, like one key thought per question. But first, what is this big fuss? Why are we doing all of this? Are we actually making progress beyond the talk and the hype? Are we just spinning our wheels with all of this? And of this entire universe of interventions, from initiatives to documentaries to graphic novels to, Black Panther, all of them, what do you think is the most productive way to move the needle? If you could pick one. So that was a big question. Why all this fuss? Why are we all going crazy and expending a lot of energy about women in science? Is all this hype and talk translating to anything? Is it helpful for us to watch this kind of thing?
Firstly, so women are what? 57% of the population. So if we don't include them, we're excluding a huge portion of what could be development. So we can't develop if we don't actually include women. So that's the why for me. Are we making progress? So I'm gonna just a bit long and allow me to do that. I thought we were. In 2002, when I came back to Kenya, I interviewed for a pharmacology position. It was all men. I was totally intimidated. And the talk was, really, do you want to come back as a woman? I got the job, thank God.
No surprises.
And I ventured into this journey at KEMRI, at the Kenya Medical Research Institute. At that time, we didn't have role models. We did not see role models like us. And I thought, yeah, now we have many of us in this space. A couple of weeks ago, I went for the 40th anniversary for KEMRI. and they had asked me to speak about gender. And the beginning talk was all about, these are who we are. Director after director after director after director after director was a man. How many years later? 2002, and we're now in 2020. And I was disheartened because there were some of the role models that we looked out to who were in Kemri at the time are there. So what are we saying? Are we having equal outcomes? You know, we're definitely pushing the needle and saying, let's train more women, and we're doing it. Because I know many women, we're many of us who've been trained as scientists in Kemri. We were many. In fact, I think we outnumber men in terms of the PhDs. Yet we're not getting the leadership positions. So for me, it was a moment of, we're not getting the equal outcomes. So something has to happen. We have to change, because the outcomes, we're not there yet. We're not having 74 universities, both private and public universities. Only 9 of them have women vice chancellors in Kenya.
So what's your magic tool to fix this? One only.
I think we just need to change the structures. We have the policies. It's how we implement them. So I'm looking into why the implementation isn't happening as we should.
Okay. So Gladys, do you mind just jumping off, and we'll close with Jemimah?
Yes. Well, if I think about why the FARS, I think she has clearly said it, and I still very remember well during the L'Oreal is like going to war with half of your soldiers, like, you know, how you expect to win. So that's the whole point. And I think we've reached into a time and a generation where we cannot sit back anymore as women and just expect. I mean, maybe our grandmothers could, but we've gotten to a time and age, and even just the century itself, that it cannot just allow you as a woman to just sit back and wait. We have to get into the field. But then the field, of course, is not equal, because we still have the cultural norms that are still holding us behind. And maybe that's the reason why we still have very few women, breaking the ceiling, because as much as you are well and you have everything, it gets to that point where they cannot see beyond, they see you as a woman first before they see your credit. You hear about vice chancellors or, at DVCs who get there and they're expected to serve tea in a board meeting. So at that point, really, it's no longer about our qualifications or anything. That is the point where culture comes in. And for me, it's really about the parents. How do we solve this is when we're raising our children. Because as much as we're trying to push it, there's a generation we have to accept that's how it's going to be.
So
but then
we write off one generation.
it's the generation that we're bringing in right now.
This is a good conversation for the cocktails.
It's the generation that we have to raise with different mindset and everything, because it's a culture, it's really into us. So that's, for me, it would be the...
So culture and kind of working at the family and societal level for you. Okay, so Jemimah, now you close us off, and I know you're a feminist theorist, so we have high expectations for your prescriptions.
This is too much pressure. I'll just give another analogy for the why. So can you imagine confronting your enemy? Both of their hands are free, and you tie one of yours behind. Like, what are you doing? And that's what we've been doing. We are expecting that we are going to develop while we leave one hand behind, while we tie one hand behind, while we fail to provide the same opportunities to women. Is it translating to change? I think we've seen a lot of change. I mean, even now when I go to universities, and I do that a lot, and find that, even heads of departments of physics are saying, we used to have 5 female students out of a class of 200. And now they're saying, we've moved to 50, we've moved to 20. So there are places where change is happening. But I like very much the leaky pipeline that he gave, because as you go up, it starts to change. We are happy to give women the basics, the basic. But as soon as it starts becoming now in the empowerment space, the leadership space, the decision-making space, that's where change is not happening fast enough. So I want to ask the men, there's a lot of men here. Remember, out of how many VCs did you say are women? The rest of you are all guys. The 28% of women we saw who are scientists, the rest of you all are guys. There is a table there. You know the way we keep saying we want women at the table? We really have to change that table, because that table was not actually built for us. So we need to dismantle a lot of systemic things. Our latest grant from IDRC was to look at the systemic barriers. I'm telling you, we are not going to do this a girl at a time. Imagine how many girls we have. Can we do those 3 children at a time? There's no way we're going to do 3 girls at a time. It's going to take us the next several generations to get it done. So there's a lot of our systems that we need to change. And men have to be part of changing those systems. Every time a man asks me, what are you doing? I ask them, what are you doing? Even that socialization. We know we can tell girls to achieve, to dream and have their big dreams. Even when you go to boys' schools, when you tell them, you know, gender roles are changing, by the time you actually get married, your wife is going to be working. You're going to be a dual-income household. So how are you going to be behaving? And they look at me very skeptically, of course, because I've never been a man. Huh? And so men, as we tell our girls that they can achieve, as we tell our boys that the place of the woman is also at that decision table, men, what are you telling them? What is the message you're giving to your girls and to your boys? That's the only way we are going to get this train moving.
Okay, so thanks for that. So, you know, so you're saying systematic change. So it's not just this working on individuals. The systems have to change and men have to be involved. Okay, so those are, I think, really, really great thoughts. And again, I think this is a really good conversation to take out into the next cocktail hour session. A couple of quick last questions before I open it up for the floor. One kind of elephant in the room that I often encounter is this question of local products. So all the women featured in the documentary were educated abroad. Sometimes South Africa may or may not be considered to be abroad. It depends on, especially if you ask a South African where they think they are. But you know, this is true of many top scientists in Africa. And I remember recently we had a leadership retreat for Mawazo Fellows, and they're all educated locally, and all the panelists, most of them were educated abroad. And somebody just actually asked, it seems that, you know, the success is for you guys who have gone Maju, and what about us? And so, does this matter, this discrepancy, and why? That we have all of this, the stars are going out there and sometimes choosing to come back. Does it matter? And why? And what can we do to enable and highlight local success stories? So, okay, I guess, Jemimah, you seem to be jumping at the bit.
You know why I'm itching? Because I was educated in Tanzania. I did my PhD at the Sokoine University of Agriculture. And everywhere where I go, and somehow everybody wants to know the moment people know you have a PhD, everybody wants to know
is it Harvard?
Where you
is it Yale?
did your PhD. And I go like Sokoine University of Agriculture. And they're like, so where is that? And I say, it is in some rural agricultural town in central Tanzania. Oh, you actually speak very well. I thought you were educated in the US. Anyway, I won't tell you the whole thing of that conversation, but it goes sort of in that direction. But what I want to say is that I have met brilliant people, including myself. I have met myself, and I am brilliant. I have met myself, and I'm extremely brilliant. Please take my word for it.
We agree.
And I was educated in this continent. So they are very brilliant scientists that I have met, educated in this continent, all the way from the Cape to the northern tip, from the east to the west. But I'm also going to say something about this, because one of the things that I always say is we need to start decolonizing our education system and decolonizing our funding systems. The reason why people are fundraising, mothers are selling cows and goats and plots to take children to the US and to Europe. You think a mother wants to sell her only cow so that their child can go to the US? If our education systems work and we invest in them, we put the resources where they need to be. I was looking at that laboratory in South Africa, in Rhodes, and thinking if we had that laboratory in every university in this continent, who wouldn't want to work with that? I was wishing I could redo my PhD and just like work in that space. So there's an investment that we need to be making in our educational institutions and in our funding institutions. One of the programs I'm really proud of in IDRC is that we are strengthening the science granting councils of Africa, because that's where funding needs to be flowing from. So that even as you seek collaborations outside, that we actually already have our own local resources that we are seeking collaboration with. Because let nobody cheat you. Whoever holds the purse is also holding the agenda. I can tell you that. So that is something we shouldn't lie to ourselves about. That whoever holds the purse holds the agenda. And we need money, funding. If you are here and your government, resources need to flow to universities and to the funding councils so that we can start also addressing the research priorities that we have.
Amen.
As countries.
Amen. Thanks so much for that. So yeah, I'd love to hear the opinions from the rest of the panel. I think here we have a mixed panel, some educated here, some educated abroad, some in between. So.
Okay, so I'm guilty now after you speak. After Jemimah says educated here, you almost want to whisper educated abroad. But anyway, at APHRC we have one program we call the Consortium for Advanced Research Training in Africa. And interestingly, it was born of that realization that APHRC would interview postdocs, and most of the postdocs that they took were foreign trained and not Africa trained. So our director and at the time Alex Eze and Sharon Fon in WITS were like, okay, is there something we can do about this? We need to strengthen our PhD programs here so that we're not seeing this trend going on. So that's why Carter was actually started, to train our own. So it's an Africa-led, Africa-born program to train PhDs in the continent. It has 8 universities in the consortia. We train faculty there. So we're at 235 fellows. 87 of them have graduated, and they are fully Africa trained, and they are on technical committees, and they're leading in their own areas of space. So, and we're getting there. We're seeing them taking up leadership. So it's possible, and you can do it. As Jemimah said, many brilliant minds who just need that impetus. So the funding is a huge problem because we couldn't have done this without funding. I mean, unfortunately, most of our programs are still funded from the outside. So it's selling that narrative and getting our governments to start saying, okay, fine, our PhDs here can be funded by ourselves. So we like to hear about the science granting councils because that's where we think it would shift the agenda.
Yeah, I completely see that, and I would love to hear. When you guys are, gathering in the cocktail hour, I'll just be on the edges, to make sure you're talking about the topic at hand. But the question of priorities, like the final woman from Madagascar said, like, is it a luxury when there's nothing on the table to be thinking about funding our universities and our PhDs? So I think that's something that I often think about, and I hope you guys can continue that conversation. So Grace. Gladys, I'm so sorry, over to you.
All right, so for me, I mean, your question is really something that it's more like what my story, this is what, immediately when I finished campus and my undergrad, like just so many people I know right now, if you can admit, I wanted to go abroad for my master's. I did not think even for a second that I would want to do it in Kenya or in a Kenyan university. Now, as I think in retrospect, how did I end up thinking that I wouldn't want to do my master's in Kenya? I think, well, it was just the idea that you need to go abroad. Abroad looks as the place where you want to, every person, you want to go there, you want to explore, something like that. But some of the reason personally, I remember I did not want was like, oh, so who would go through the process of university, for instance, missing marks? I mean, if I have to redo it all over again, have missing marks. I wouldn't want to do that all over again. So partly probably is because of the systems of our university.
Your experience in undergraduate has traumatized you, basically.
Yeah, you would have missing marks. You would not be able to graduate on time because of, I don't know, there's one university or your lecturers, those problems. So in my mind, you're thinking maybe abroad is something that you would, it's better and advanced. And also there's always the perception that they're way advanced than what you have. And, but then things started changing when I did my master's after 2 years of writing for scholarships and getting rejections. Oh, the pain of, writing. And then, oh, dear, we received, it's our, how do they reject you? If you've been through that process. And I remember, and I used to apply for all these, Erasmus Mundus, all those elite programs. And then you'll have people who will tell you, even fellow people like, Gladys, you can qualify, your CV is good and everything. And then you used to apply for these things and you still get discouraged. So it got to a point when I'm thinking, no, my time is up. I need to finish my master's. And then at the time, then I got an opportunity at ASIPE, and they're like, you can do in one of the universities. It wasn't my option, but because now I am forced to, then I had to do it there. And then I got in all those. And then in the process, I think as even my PhD, of course now I was 100% sure it's not going to repeat. I'm going to do my PhD, the same thing, and then it never happened. But then as now I'm in ISIPE, and ISIPE is, we do have, was founded by an African,
And so you have the world-class,
and
like international collaborators.
He's a Kenyan from, down there in the lakeside. He founded ISIPE and also founded AAS. And, those are what Africans can do.